Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're back with another episode of Stock Market Recap, and today we had one of the worst days of 2025 for the stock market. The second worst day actually after a day that we had about 2 weeks ago where the S&P dropped 3%. Today it's down another 2% and a lot of individual stocks are crashing, so today we're going to break everything down. I'm going to try to break everything down in simple terms, so even if you're a newer investor, feel free to stick around. Maybe you'll learn something new today. Let's just get right into it. All right, so here I pulled up the stock screener, and as you can see, pretty much everything is red today, especially tech. Tech has been getting absolutely destroyed these past couple of weeks, ever since the Trump tariffs war started. And today we actually had a lot of other sectors join into the downwards momentum, including financials and consumer defensives or even industrials. And all these sectors have kind of held up pretty well compared to tech. Tech obviously gets sold off the most usually during these stock market corrections, but today we actually had a lot of these quote unquote recession proof stocks kind of collapse with the rest of the market, which is really interesting. It could suggest that we're kind of getting overvalued compared to kind of what we're pricing into the future when it comes to inflation or stuff like that. Because a lot of important institutions are coming out and saying that they think inflation is going to gap up a lot higher than it is right now. And obviously, the Fed wants inflation to come down closer to 2%. That's where they would ideally cut rates. And rate cuts tend to be really good for the stock market. But if inflation continues upwards, where a lot of people are projecting it will go, obviously that would make it really hard for rate cuts to happen. And yeah, that's why we're seeing a market-wide sell-off today. So if we look at the actual S&P, we were down 2% today. It was 2.2% at the worst. We did recover a tiny bit, but really nothing substantial. The Nasdaq was down almost 3% today, and then the Dow was down 1.7%. And this is kind of proof that it's really the whole market selling off. It's not just tech, because usually the Nasdaq gets hit the worst, and it is down the worst today, but that always happens. But even the Dow being down 1.7%, that's really unusual, and it's one of its worst days in 2025. And like I said in the intro, the S&P had its second worst day today. I believe the Nasdaq had its third worst day, something like that. So really, we're just not doing well on the indices as well as the rest of the market. And we see a lot of these individual stocks get absolutely crushed. Even Google's down 5% today. Amazon was down 4%. Meta was down 4%. If I switch to 1 month performance for these stocks, you can see it's really not been a great month at all. It's actually been the worst month for the S&P since December of 2022, which was really a long time ago now. And you don't love to see it. And it's really all because of the fear of Trump's tariff plans and just in general his administration being more uncertain than we would have liked. And yeah, and it also, I guess, comes from fears that, like I just said earlier, we might not be getting rate cuts if inflation does go up in the short term. And the Fed have their next meeting in May, and the chance of a rate cut actually went down pretty substantially, which kind of just adds on to the potential fear that we have in the stock market, and that could be a big contributor of why we sold off today. So if we look at the companies that performed the worst today, first we have Lululemon. They actually had earnings today, and although they did beat their headline numbers, which was a beat on EPS and on revenue, they did lower their guidance. And in the earnings call, they said that they are afraid of Trump's tariffs and potential inflation. So they're worried about the consumer. That's not good at all. to here, so it makes sense that they were down 14% today. I think they were down 16% at their worst, so they really didn't get any love today. No buyers, and yeah, that kind of makes sense. Then we also had on semiconductor, which yeah, this one's not been doing well at all. I think it's down about 40% year to date. Um, and then we just have a lot of these stocks, kind of growth stocks, but also value stocks. And yeah, today has just not been a good day for a lot of the companies in the S&P 500. I mean, you could see I'm scrolling down, and all of these companies are down between 3 and 5%, which is just absolutely brutal. And yeah, this really all comes down to April 2nd, which I've been talking a lot about on the channel. April 2nd is the day where Trump officially puts in his tariffs, and depending on how that goes, stocks will either get a sharp rebound or they will continue going lower. And we really already priced in a lot of the negative potential that April 2nd could have. So I think we're most likely going to go to the upside unless it's like really bad. But I really don't think that Trump is going to put 50% tariffs on China, because that would be ridiculous, and that obviously would cause China to retaliate, and that would just end up in a huge mess between the US and potentially some other countries. So yeah, if everything goes well, I don't know if this red will really last that long. Usually the market tends to overreact when it comes to uncertain events, and April 2nd is definitely one of the most uncertain events we've had in a very long time. And we're definitely, in my opinion, overreacting to the downside. Just like we kind of overreacted to the upside when it came to 2024, which was one of the best years for the stock market in the 21st century. But yeah, we'll see what happens in just a couple of days, and we'll see what tariffs Trump puts and on what countries. And finally, I did want to talk about two smaller stories that we had this week. So first up, we have AppLovin, which many of you might not have heard of before. This is a stock that actually did amazingly well in 2024. I think it was up like 800% or something like that, which is absolutely crazy. They're actually a huge company, 90 billion market cap. That's really substantial, and their stock tends to be really volatile, which is interesting for such a large market cap. And this stock has been getting absolutely destroyed as of lately, and it's mostly because of the Trump tariffs trade, but also there have been many short reports that came out not too long ago about it, and the most recent one was yesterday, and it was actually down a whole 20% yesterday, which I thought was pretty wild. And you know, just to put that into perspective, for this company that is somewhere around $20 billion of market cap that they lost in one day from one short report. And I do think this stock is kind of overvalued, but yeah, I mean, it's down 50% from the highs, and I do think it's just we're not in a really friendly environment for growth stocks like this one. And I think that's mostly why it's getting sold off. And really, that's the story with a lot of stocks right now. Um, and I do think that they will start climbing back up as soon as either inflation comes back down or Trump administration gives us some good news, and then we kind of get this bull market back in action. And yeah, and the second story I did want to talk about was actually having to do with GameStop. And GameStop actually had earnings the other day, and they had a really nice 10% pop. And that was because they are finally buying Bitcoin, which a lot of people have been saying they should do for a very long time now, and they're only now doing it after Bitcoin ran up like 100 something% in 2024, which well, initially it ran up 10%, so I guess seemed like a good idea at first, but then turns out in order to buy the Bitcoin, their CEO, Ryan Cohen, is diluting the shareholders, which basically that's never a good thing. And therefore their stock sold off 25% in one day, which erased the whole earnings gain and just a large which was just a large loss, and now it's down 30% year to date, and I really don't know why people are still buying this stock. I think the hype kind of died out ever since that 2021 Roaring Kitty pump. If you don't know more, I mean, if you don't know what that is, I'll probably talk about it someday, but basically there was a huge rally in GameStop about 4 years ago now, and yeah, the share price went up like 2,000% in a couple days, and then it instantly went back down. And it was like a huge thing. A lot of people made money. A lot of people lost money. And I'll have to talk about it more in detail someday. But some of you know what I'm talking about. But now I feel like this stock's just kind of in the gutter, and I do think this decline is going to continue probably. But I guess we'll see. And yeah, that's probably going to do it for today. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Stock Market Recap. We'll be back next Monday. You might actually notice I have a little bit of a different setup today. I'm actually in Boston right now, but we'll be back to the normal setup next week. And yeah, hope to see you then.